He stood frozen in the dining room doorway, his hand trembling against the frame. His daughter, the little girl who hadn't eaten in 14 agonizing days, was chewing. Slowly, deliberately. The new maid sat beside her, smiling with a gentleness that seemed to glow. Ethan Caldwell covered his mouth as tears flooded his eyes, and all he could think was, how? Ethan lost his wife 3 months ago. Emily died suddenly. No warning, no goodbye. Just gone. Their 2-year-old daughter Lily didn't understand heaven. She just knew Mommy wasn't coming back, and something inside her shattered. She stopped laughing, stopped reaching for her toys, stopped looking at anyone with those bright eyes that once lit up every room. And 2 weeks ago, she stopped eating. Doctors flew in from across the country, elite pediatricians, child trauma specialists, nutritionists who'd spent decades saving children's lives. None of them could reach her. Lily just sat there, fading a little more each day, staring through people like they were ghosts. Ethan would hold plates of her favorite foods, begging, bribing, promising her the world. She wouldn't even blink. The mansion that once echoed with laughter became a cold shrine of grief. Ethan was a billionaire. He'd built an empire from nothing. He could buy anything, solve any problem, but he couldn't save his own daughter. Then one quiet morning, a new maid arrived. Her name was Naomi Brooks. She was soft-spoken, humble, came from a neighborhood where miracles were prayed for, not purchased. When the house manager briefed her on Lily's condition, Naomi didn't look horrified. She looked knowing. Because when Naomi was 8 years old, her mother died too. And she remembered what it felt like to want to disappear from a world that no longer made sense. That same afternoon, Naomi went to Lily's room. She didn't come with medical charts or feeding strategies. She just sat on the floor beside the silent little girl and began humming an old hymn her grandmother used to sing. Lily's eyes flickered, just for a heartbeat. The next morning, Naomi made something simple, toast with a touch of honey, the way Emily used to make it. She didn't push it toward Lily or coax her with desperate words. She simply sat across from her, bowed her head, and prayed. Softly, genuinely. Then she looked up and smiled. And Lily, for the first time in 2 weeks, reached out her small hand. Ethan was in his study, drowning in work he couldn't focus on when he heard footsteps running down the hallway. The house manager burst through the door, breathless, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, she's eating." He didn't let himself believe it. He'd been disappointed too many times. But he ran anyway, taking the stairs 2 at a time, his heart hammering against his ribs. When he reached the dining room, he stopped cold. There was his daughter, holding a piece of toast, chewing slowly, tears sliding down her flushed cheeks. And sitting beside her, calm as morning light, was a woman he'd barely noticed when she arrived. Before we go further, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button and leave a like, because what you're about to hear will wreck you in the best way. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, especially if you've ever felt powerless watching someone you love slip away. Because what happens next will remind you that sometimes, when science fails and money runs out, God sends an answer wrapped in the quietest, most unexpected package. And this answer didn't just save Lily's life. It resurrected an entire family. Now let me take you back to where this miracle really began. 3 months earlier, Emily Caldwell died in her sleep. An undiagnosed heart condition, the doctor said. One moment she was there, and the next, she was gone. Ethan found her in the morning, still and cold beside him, and his world collapsed. The funeral was a blur of black suits and hollow condolences. Lily sat on his lap during the service, quiet and confused, clutching her mother's scarf. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home. Ethan had no answer that made sense to a 2-year-old. How do you explain forever to someone who's barely learned yesterday and tomorrow? In the weeks that followed, Ethan buried himself in work. Conference calls at midnight. Business trips he didn't need to take. Anything to avoid the empty side of the bed, the silence in the hallways, the toys scattered across the floor that no one played with anymore. He told himself he was providing, protecting, securing their future. But the truth was simpler and more devastating. He was hiding, and while he hid, Lily was drowning. She stopped asking for her mother after the first month. She just stopped asking for anything. The light went out of her eyes. She'd sit in her playroom for hours, staring at nothing, not touching a single toy. Then, she stopped speaking altogether. The pediatrician called it selective mutism, a trauma response. He said she'd come out of it with time and therapy. But time passed, and Lily only withdrew further. 2 weeks ago, she stopped eating. Not dramatically. She just turned her head away from every meal, every snack, every attempt to coax food past her lips. Within days, her cheeks hollowed. Her skin grew pale. Her little body became frighteningly fragile. That's when the specialists started arriving. They came with clipboards and degrees and decades of experience. They tried everything: behavioral therapy, sensory interventions, feeding tubes. Lily wouldn't cooperate. She'd just stare through them like they weren't even there. One doctor pulled Ethan aside and said the words that broke him. "Mr. Caldwell, if she doesn't eat soon, we'll have no choice but to hospitalize her. And even then, I can't promise you we can save her." That night, Ethan fell to his knees in his office and prayed for the first time since Emily's funeral. He didn't have eloquent words, just desperation. "God, if you're there, if you're listening, please. I can't lose her too. Please." The next morning, Naomi Brooks walked through the front door. The house manager had hired her without much fanfare. They needed help. Naomi needed work. It was supposed to be simple. But the moment Naomi stepped into that house, something shifted. She was different from the parade of professionals who'd passed through. She didn't carry medical bags or therapy tools. She carried herself with a quiet strength, the kind that comes from surviving your own storms. When the house manager explained Lily's situation, Naomi's eyes filled with recognition, not pity. "I understand," she said softly. That afternoon, Naomi went upstairs to Lily's room. The little girl sat on the floor by the window, knees pulled to her chest, staring at nothing. Naomi didn't announce herself with loud cheerfulness or forced energy. She simply sat down a few feet away and began folding the laundry she'd brought up. She worked quietly, humming an old hymn under her breath. Lily didn't look at her, not at first, but after a few minutes, her head tilted slightly, just enough to hear the melody. Naomi kept humming, kept folding, kept existing in Lily's space without demanding anything from her. And for the first time in weeks, Lily's eyes moved. Just a flicker, just a glance. But it was something. The next day, Naomi came back. She brought fresh flowers from the garden, simple white daisies, and placed them in a small vase on the table beside Lily. She sat down and gently took Lily's hand, guiding it to touch the soft petals. "Your mama loved flowers," Naomi said quietly. "I bet she's in a garden right now, more beautiful than anything we've ever seen." Lily's fingers trembled against the petals, but she didn't pull away. Naomi began reading from a children's Bible, stories about shepherds and lost sheep, about a father who never stopped searching for his children. She didn't preach, she just read, her voice warm and steady, filling the silence with something other than grief. Downstairs, Ethan watched through the baby monitor, his heart caught between hope and disbelief. For the first time since Emily died, Lily was responding to someone. Not with words, not yet, but her eyes followed Naomi's movements. Her body leaned slightly toward her voice. Something in this woman's presence was reaching his daughter in a way nothing else had. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, Naomi knelt beside her bed in the small maid's quarters. She folded her hands and closed her eyes. "Lord, show me how to reach this child's heart. Lead me. I know what it's like to want to disappear. I know what it's like to feel like the world doesn't make sense without the person you love most. Use me, Father. Let me be your hands and your voice for this little girl. I don't have medical training. I don't have degrees, but I have you. And if you can use me, I'm willing." The next morning, Naomi woke with a strange certainty pressing on her spirit. Today was different. She went to the kitchen before dawn and made something simple: toast with honey, lightly browned, cut into small squares. The house manager had mentioned it was what Emily used to make for Lily. Naomi carried the plate upstairs, prayed over it quietly in the hallway, then entered Lily's room. The little girl was already awake, sitting in the same spot by the window. Naomi sat down across from her at the small table and placed the plate between them. She didn't push it toward Lily, didn't coax or beg. She simply bowed her head and whispered a prayer of gratitude, of faith, of desperate hope. Then she looked up and smiled. Lily stared at the toast, her small face expressionless. But then something changed. Her eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. Naomi leaned forward just slightly and spoke in the gentlest voice. "Sweet girl, eating doesn't take you away from your mommy. It keeps you strong until God says it's time. Your mama would want you to be strong. She'd want you to live." For a long moment, nothing happened. The room held its breath, and then, slowly, shakily, Lily's hand reached out. Her tiny fingers touched the edge of the plate. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't move, didn't react. She just waited, praying silently, letting God do what medicine couldn't. And in that sacred, impossible moment, something spiritual shifted in the Caldwell home. The door to healing had finally cracked open. Naomi woke before sunrise with a certainty she couldn't explain. It pressed against her chest, warm and urgent, like a voice without words. Today is the day. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, and immediately dropped to her knees. "Father, I don't know what you're about to do, but I feel you moving. Give me the words. Give me the wisdom. Use me however you need." She stayed there for 20 minutes, praying in whispers, feeling the weight of something sacred about to unfold. When she finally stood, her hands were steady. Her spirit was calm. She knew, somehow, that God was already in that room waiting. She walked down the hallway to Lily's room, knocked softly, and entered. The little girl sat in her usual spot by the window, knees tucked to her chest, eyes distant. Naomi smiled gently and knelt beside her. "Good morning, sweetheart. I made something special for you today." Lily didn't respond, but her eyes flickered toward Naomi for just a second. Naomi reached out her hand. "Will you come sit with me?" For a long moment, nothing. Then, slowly, Lily uncurled herself and let Naomi take her small hand. They walked together to the dining room, Lily's steps hesitant and fragile, like she might shatter with any sudden movement. Naomi settled Lily into the chair and sat across from her, just like she'd done the day before. On the table between them was a small plate with a single piece of toast, lightly browned, glistening with honey. The room was quiet, except for the soft hum of the chandelier above them and the distant sound of birds outside. Naomi reached across the table and took Lily's hands in hers. She closed her eyes and prayed aloud, her voice gentle but filled with faith. "Lord, we thank you for this food. We thank you for this beautiful child. We ask that you heal her heart, her body, her spirit. Let her feel your love through every bite. Let her know she's not alone. In Jesus' name, amen." When Naomi opened her eyes, Lily was staring at the toast. Not with the blank emptiness she'd worn for weeks, but with something else. Longing. Fear. Confusion. Naomi picked up a small piece and held it out toward her. "Just one bite. Sweet girl. That's all. Just one." Lily's lips trembled. Her eyes filled with tears. She looked at the toast, then at Naomi, then back at the toast. The seconds stretched into eternity. And then, with a shaky breath, Lily leaned forward and opened her mouth. Naomi's hand trembled as she gently placed the piece of toast on Lily's tongue. The little girl closed her mouth, chewed slowly, swallowed, and for the first time in 14 days, food went down. Naomi's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her composure, smiling softly. "Good girl. You're so brave. So strong." She offered another small piece. Lily hesitated, then took it. Then another. Each bite was slow, deliberate, like she was learning how to live again. That's when Ethan walked in. He'd been coming down the stairs to grab coffee, his mind heavy with exhaustion and dread, when he heard something that stopped him cold. The sound of chewing. He stood frozen in the hallway, afraid to believe it, afraid to hope. Then he moved toward the dining room, each step careful, like he was approaching something holy. When he reached the doorway, he saw it. His daughter, sitting at the table, eating. Naomi sat across from her, calm and radiant, offering her another piece of toast. Ethan's hand flew to his mouth. His knees buckled slightly, and he grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. Tears poured down his face, hot and uncontrollable. He tried to speak, but no words came. Just a sob that ripped from somewhere deep inside him. Lily looked up and saw her father, and something in her broke open. Her face crumpled, her small body began to shake, and she started crying. Not quiet tears, deep, guttural sobs that came from months of buried grief. Naomi stood immediately and moved to her side, wrapping her arms around the little girl, holding her close. "Let it out, baby. Let it all out. You're safe now." Lily clung to her, wailing into her shoulder, her tiny body convulsing with the weight of everything she'd been holding inside. Ethan collapsed to his knees, right there in the doorway, his own sobs matching his daughter's. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders heaving. All the money in the world, all the doctors, all the specialists. And it took this woman, this stranger with nothing but faith, to reach his daughter. He felt broken and grateful and devastated all at once. And then, through her tears, Lily spoke. Her voice was small and raw, but every word landed like a hammer. "I stopped eating because I want to go to Mommy in heaven." The room went silent except for the sound of Lily's broken breathing. Ethan's head snapped up, his face stricken. Naomi held Lily tighter, her own tears falling now. She looked into the little girl's eyes and spoke with a tenderness that could only come from someone who'd walked through the same darkness. "Sweet girl, God doesn't take us because we miss someone. He gives us time to finish our own story here. Your mama is waiting for you, but not yet. You still have so much life to live, so many people to love, so many beautiful things to see. And she's watching over you, cheering for you, wanting you to be happy." Lily turned her tear-streaked face toward her father, and what she said next shattered him completely. "You don't hold me anymore, Daddy." Ethan's breath caught. His heart felt like it was being ripped apart. She was right. He'd been so consumed by his own grief, so lost in his own pain, that he'd abandoned her. His little girl had been suffering alone, while he hid behind work and denial. He'd failed her when she needed him most. He crawled across the floor on his hands and knees and reached for her. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." Lily slid out of Naomi's arms and fell into her father's. Ethan scooped her up and held her tighter than he'd ever held anything in his life, pressing his face into her hair, sobbing openly. "I'm here now. I promise I'm here. I won't leave you alone again. I love you so much. I'm so sorry." Lily wrapped her small arms around his neck and clung to him, crying into his shoulder. They stayed like that, broken and healing all at once, two shattered pieces finally coming back together. Naomi stepped back quietly, her hands folded in front of her, her head bowed. She whispered a prayer of gratitude, thanking God for what he'd just done, for the miracle she'd been allowed to witness. And as she watched father and daughter hold each other and weep, she knew the hardest part was over. The healing had begun. The light was returning, and God had used her broken past to resurrect a broken family. The house began to wake up again. Slowly at first, like the first light of dawn creeping through curtains that had been closed too long. Lily started eating small meals, applesauce and crackers, scrambled eggs and berries. She didn't finish everything on her plate, but she ate. And that was enough. Within days, color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes brightened. Her movements became less fragile, less haunted. One morning, Ethan heard something he thought he'd never hear again. Laughter. Faint and tentative, but real. He dropped the papers he was holding and ran to the living room. Lily was sitting on the floor with Naomi, stacking blocks, and when the tower fell, she giggled. Ethan stood in the doorway, his hand pressed to his chest, tears streaming down his face. That sound, that beautiful sound, was life returning to his home. He cleared his schedule, canceled meetings, turned off his phone. For the first time since Emily died, he chose to be present. He sat on the floor and played with Lily, building towers and crashing them down, making silly voices that made her laugh. He read her stories every night, tucking her in with the tenderness he should have given her months ago. He carried her everywhere, on his shoulders through the garden, in his arms while they watched the sunset, holding her close like he was afraid she might disappear if he let go. And every time she looked up at him and smiled, it felt like a resurrection. One evening after Lily had fallen asleep, Ethan sat in the nursery, holding one of Emily's scarves. For the first time since the funeral, he let himself really feel the loss. He didn't run from it or bury it in work. He just sat there and cried, deep and raw, mourning the woman he loved, the life they were supposed to have, the future that had been stolen. He talked to her out loud, apologizing for not being strong enough, for failing their daughter, for letting grief turn him into a ghost. "I'm sorry, Em. I'm so sorry. But I'm going to do better. I promise. I'm going to take care of her the way you would have wanted, the way she deserves." And somehow, in that quiet room, filled with moonlight and memories, he felt a peace he hadn't felt in months. Like Emily was there, forgiving him, releasing him, telling him it was okay to keep living. Naomi became more than just someone who worked in the house. She became a steady presence, a source of wisdom and comfort that Ethan didn't know he needed. She'd sit with him in the evenings after Lily went to bed, and they'd talk, not about schedules or tasks, but about grief, about faith, about how to rebuild a life after it's been shattered. She never preached or lectured. She just shared her own story. The loss of her mother, the years of anger and confusion, the moment she finally let God carry what she couldn't. "Grief doesn't disappear, Mr. Caldwell," she said one night. "It just becomes something you carry differently, and you don't have to carry it alone." Her words didn't fix everything, but they helped. They reminded him he wasn't the first person to walk through the valley of loss, and he wouldn't be the last. And somehow, that made it more bearable. Ethan started noticing things about Naomi he hadn't seen before. The way she hummed while she worked, filling the house with quiet melodies. The way she prayed over every meal, even when no one was watching. The way Lily reached for her instinctively, trusting her in a way she hadn't trusted anyone since Emily died. Naomi wasn't just staff. She wasn't just help. She was the woman who had saved his daughter's life. The woman who had walked into their brokenness and brought light. He found himself watching her, sometimes, gratitude swelling in his chest so strongly it hurt. One afternoon, he finally said it out loud. "Naomi, I don't know how to thank you. You saved Lily. You saved us." She looked up from the flowers she was arranging and smiled gently, shaking her head. "I didn't heal her, Mr. Caldwell. God did. I just held the light." Her humility floored him. She didn't want credit or recognition. She just wanted to be faithful to what she'd been called to do. And that, more than anything, showed Ethan what real strength looked like. Weeks passed, and the house that had once felt like a tomb became a home again. Lily's laughter echoed through the hallways. The garden bloomed with flowers Naomi had planted, bright and alive. One Sunday morning, Ethan suggested they all go to church together. Lily held his hand on one side, and Naomi's on the other as they walked through the doors. It was the first time Ethan had stepped into a church since the funeral, And this time, he wasn't there to mourn. He was there to give thanks. A month after that impossible morning when Lily first ate again, they sat together at the dining table. This time, there was no tension, no fear, no desperation, just a father, his daughter, and the woman who had brought them back to life. Lily ate her breakfast joyfully, chattering about a butterfly she'd seen in the garden, her voice bright and full of wonder. Naomi smiled as she poured orange juice, and Ethan watched them both, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. This was the miracle. Not just that Lily had survived, but that they were living again. Really living. The grief hadn't disappeared, but it no longer consumed them. Emily's memory was woven into their days now, not as a haunting absence, but as a presence they honored, a love that continued to shape them even in her physical absence. Ethan reached across the table and took Naomi's hand. With his daughter eating her breakfast and the morning light streaming through the windows, Ethan bowed his head and prayed. Not a desperate plea or a cry for help, but a prayer of gratitude, for second chances, for healing, for the woman God had sent when they needed her most. Because here's the truth that most people miss. Some miracles come through doctors in white coats and hospitals with machines that beep and hum. Others come through medicine measured in milligrams and prescribed with precision. But sometimes, when the science fails and the experts walk away shaking their heads, God sends something different. He sends a gentle soul with calloused hands and a faithful heart. Someone who's been broken and healed. Someone who knows what it's like to walk through the valley and come out on the other side. Someone carrying just enough light to guide others out of the darkness. Naomi Brooks didn't have a medical degree. She didn't have wealth or status or credentials that would impress anyone. What she had was faith, compassion, and a willingness to be used. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Because that morning in the Caldwell home, when a 2-year-old girl took her first bite of food in 14 days, it wasn't just her body that was saved. It was her soul. Her father's soul. The soul of a family that had been dying right alongside her. And the woman who made it possible didn't do it with medicine or therapy or technique. She did it with love. The kind of love that only comes from knowing God intimately, from being held by Him through your own darkest nights, and then turning around to hold someone else through theirs. That's the miracle. Not that Lily ate, but that in the eating, she remembered she wanted to live. And her father remembered he had a reason to keep going. And a broken home became whole again.